Okay, so in today's setup guide, we are checking out the very best of Commodore Amiga emulation for PC, which is the awesome WinUAE. So I last covered this almost a year ago, and we've recently just got a brand new update a few hours before recording this video today. So in this video, we're going to be looking at some new features with the new WinUAE. I'm going to be showing you how to make a basic configuration to get you up and running with Commodore Amiga 500 games. I'm then going to go on to show you how to emulate Commodore Amiga CD32 games, or just CD32 games. I'm going to be going through the different sections of WinUAE with you and how to save your progress, or rather save your settings so we don't have to keep loading them all back. I'm even going to show you how to customize WinUAE itself. So a lot in this video, but I'm going to make this one as simply as possible for you, so check this one out. Okay, before I start today's WinUAE setup guide for Windows PC, if you like what you see today, hit notifications, subscribe and like so you don't miss upcoming retro emulation content. Helps my channel out a great deal, plus it gets you up-to-date retro emulation setup guides as I release it, which is every day. So the last time I did a basic setup guide for the very awesome WinUAE was going almost back a year ago, and literally just a few hours ago we had a brand new version of WinUAE. If we just go over to the website, here it is. We got WinUAE 5.2.0, very awesome stuff. I'll leave the link in my description for this, and you've got lots of new features, updates on here, bug fixes, and this is a very impressive release. So what we're going to do first of all is just go to the download section, and we got a couple of different options here how we want to download this. So we can actually install this to our hard drive, or we can use a portable version. So if you're going to install this to your hard drive, you've got two versions. Like I say, we've got 32-bit and we also got 64-bit, and so for the portable versions just here. So if you're not sure which type of computer you're running, what we're going to do is just head over into our search and just type in system information. I'm always going to recommend this because it really is the easiest way to find out what those numbers mean and how to use them. So if we go to system type, I'm running x64 base PC, and this tells me that I need to download a 64-bit. Now, if you've got a 32-bit computer, which is very unlikely of this day and age, if that's the case, you'll see in that section x86. So what I'm going to do is download the portable version of WinUAE, which means everything's going to be put into a single folder. It's not going to be installed to the hard drive. If you want to install this to your hard drive, just download the installer, 32-bit or 64-bit, and then just follow the online instructions to install it. But we're going for the zip archive 64-bit portable. Now the next thing we're going to need is Kickstart ROMs. Kickstart files essentially boot your games up, and you can grab these from Amiga Forever. I actually covered Amiga Forever 10 as a complete setup guide and showcase. In fact, I've done too many Amiga videos on my channel. So if you actually want a more in-depth version of playing Amiga games rather than using something like the Amiga Mini or the A500, definitely without a doubt WinUAE is the way to go. So you can download your Kickstart ROMs from here. We got a few different versions of Amiga Forever, but do seriously check out my Amiga Forever complete guide and showcase, and that will go more in depth with what it has to offer. So what we're going to do then is actually open up that install. So what we're going to do next is actually open up that portable version of WinUAE. So we've now just downloaded the portable version, and like I say, if you want to go for the installer version of WinUAE, just go through the installation process and it's pretty straightforward. So what I'm going to do is also connect a Google Stadia controller, which works just fine with WinUAE. In fact, WinUAE is very versatile in terms of connection with your own controllers. Xbox works, PlayStation works, pretty much everything. So what we're going to do is create a new folder on desktop. So right click, new folder, and I'm going to just name this folder Amiga. You can call this folder whatever you want, and the purpose of doing this is to put everything together. So I'm going to drop my zip folder in there of WinUAE. I'm also going to drop in my Kickstart folder, which contains all of my Kickstart ROMs, which I got from Amiga Forever. And I've also got an ADF game, and I put this into ADF games folder. So everything's nice and neat now. So let's just extract the WinUAE zip. So right click and extract it. I use WinRAR, you might use something different. Extract here. And there we go. So we now got WinUAE 64.exe and we use this to open up WinUAE. So I'm going to delete the zip folder. We no longer need that and actually open up WinUAE 64 executable. So just double left click on this one. Okay, so we're now inside of WinUAE, as you can see, and it looks pretty overwhelming and pretty complex to a lot of people out there. So just make sure that your Kickstart ROMs have been scanned. So if this is your first time of using WinUAE, you might very briefly see a Kickstart ROM scan. If you don't, what we need to do for sure is just go to the path section, just here, and just go over to System ROMs, and at the end you'll find 3 dots just here. If you left click on there, what we need to do is point this into the direction of the Kickstart folder, which is of course on my desktop, and it's in my Amiga folder. And my Kickstart folder is here. So if I go to select folder, you'll then see another very lightning fast scan of those ROM files, and it's identified all of my Kickstart ROMs just here. Very cool stuff. So just press OK on this. Next thing we're going to do is just take a quick look at configurations. If we go to configurations, whatever you do in WinUAE, just make sure to save your settings. And to do this, literally go to name, and you can name your setup whatever you want. So I'm going to just type in just Jamie, and I'm going to add 1983 on the end of this because I've already made a previous configuration save as just Jamie. And what we're going to do after naming it is just go to save as, and then I'm going to type in again just Jamie 1983 and just press save. And as you can see, that's now created a little file for my save. So anything I do in this, and anything you do, whatever you do, don't forget to save everything under your file name, because WinUAE is a nightmare. You can do a lot of settings in here, forget to save it, and boom, it's all gone. Next thing we're going to look at is Quickstart. So under Quickstart, your most typical common Amiga model, which most people want to play, is of course the popular A500, the Amiga 500. If we just drop model down, you'll get different models just here. Say I wanted to use A1200 emulated, just select A1200, and everything else pretty much sets itself up for you. But we're sticking with A500. And under configuration, if you drop this down, we got several configurations just here. So if you know your Amiga well, you can select one of these configurations just here. I'm going to go for the 512 kilobyte. Slow RAM most common just here for this setup guide today. Next thing we need to do is just go down to ROM, and under main ROM file, if we drop this down, this is where everything's been scanned into. If you didn't scan it, you won't see any of this, or if you do, you'll probably just see the Aros Kickstart ROM, which isn't too great to be honest. What we can do from here is just select an A500 Kickstart ROM. So I'm going to be using the Kickstart ROM version 3.1, which covers A500, Amiga 600, Amiga 2000s. I just select this. Next up, if we go down to floppy drives, we got DF0, DF1, DF2, DF3. So each one of these represents an emulated disk drive. It's thinking that it's running a real Amiga. So what we're going to do is just make sure that 2 of these are selected. I'm going to be showing you how to set up a 2-disc game. If you're running a 1-disc game, then all you need to do is just make sure DF0 is selected and then just select your game. So 2 discs in my case, so I'm going to check both of these, and I'm going to then go to DF0 and just look for my game, which is in my desktop and in my Amiga folder. ADF games, and of course ADF are the most common type of file extension you'll get for Amiga. Besides WHD loads, which I've also covered on my channel, but that's a completely different thing. So Alien 3, I've got 2 discs, disc 1 and disc 2 or 2. If I select disc 1, as we can see, that's now been mounted into my floppy drive DF0. And then I'm going to go to DF1 and select Alien 3 disc 2 or 2. Next up, what we're going to do is just go down to input. And if you connected your controller like I have, my Stadia controller, it should be highlighted just here. Next up, if we go to game ports, some games will require your controller to be put into port 2, others will want it to be in port 1. we can actually swap ports from here. And whilst we're in game, if we press the F12 button, we can actually access this WinUAE interface and we can change or swap ports from here. Just remember that we're always going to need a Windows mouse or a system mouse. So I'm going to go to port 2 and I'm going to select my Stadia controller. And next up, we can actually go and change video settings very briefly. So under host, you'll find display. If we go here, under settings, native, it will say window. We can actually drop this down to full screen and full window. I'm going to select full screen. And we've also got other options here, which I'm going to get into in just a minute. But first, we're going to boot this game up. So what we're going to do to boot the game up is, of course, we need to go back to configurations, and I'm going to save this. So I'm going to highlight that configuration, which I showed you just a minute ago, and I'm going to just click on save. So all of those new settings, including the ROM I've just included, is all saved. So let's actually boot up the game. If I press start, and here we go. So we are in. And my controller is working just fine with this. And there you go, so all up and running, and that's working perfectly fine. So what we're going to do next is just actually switch over to emulating Amiga CD32. So to do this, we can actually save a new file with the settings what we're about to apply. So all we need to do for, say, Amiga CD32 is go to Kickstart. Under Model, just make sure that CD32 is selected. And you'll notice then that under ROM, this should automatically detect the main ROM file, which is CD32 Kickstart ROM version 3.1. Now for CD32 games, instead of going to floppy drives, we're going to go to CD and hard drives. We go just here, we can actually go to select image file, and then from here, I can select my CD32 game, which we need to select .q. If I double left click on this, and let me just remind you how to save this. So if we go to configurations, I'm going to name this CD32 configuration setup as simply CD32. I'm going to go to save as, and again in file name CD32, CD32, and save. And now we've got the configuration for that Amiga 500 setup, and we've also now got the CD32 setup. We're then going to just double make sure that the CD.Q is inserted, and here it is. So to start the game, all I'm going to do is simply go to start. course, just as always, press F12 to come out your Amiga CD32 game. And very briefly, I'm going to touch on customizing how WinUAE looks. Now, if we go to miscellaneous at the bottom here, first of all, what we can do is change this nowadays with dark modes and light modes. I'd press dark modes, and here we go. The actual interface now is changed colors, so it's a pretty cool, nice feature. And if we want to go to full screen GUI, we can now go directly into full screen GUI. And we can also customize this by using GUI font. If we just click on GUI font just here, we can actually change the font. So for example, if I select Show Card Gothic and then select the font style, let's just go for bold, and we can even change the size of the font. If I go to OK, everything is going to be listed in this very cool font. And we can also go back to set default. So all of those settings we've just applied for the fonts at least has gone back to how it should be, or rather how this is set by default. Now within WinUAE, when we're playing a game, we can actually use loaded save states, and this is how you do it. So what we're going to do is just load up our Banshee game again. So just make sure Banshee is inserted into CD and hard drives, which it isn't. So what I need to do is go back to select image file and select my banshee.q. And under configurations, I'm going to just make sure CD32 is selected. And what I'm going to do here is just go to start. Okay, so once the game's loaded a bit, if I press F12, of course this is going to bring us back to WinUAE. If I just go down to miscellaneous, and what I'm going to do just here is just press on save state, and I'm going to give this save file a name, so I'm going to call this say Banshee. And if I make sure this is saved within my save states folder, just go to save, and what I'm going to do is go back to the game again. Okay, so a bit more of the game is loaded, and I'm going to load back where I've just saved it from. So before pressing on load state, I just need to make sure that my save file, which I've just created, is listed just here, and it is. So I'm going to go to load state, and select my banshee.uss, and then just simply press on OK. And here we have it, so we have now loaded back the save. Okay, so just a little earlier on in this video, I was talking about actually adding extra features to your game. So we can select scan lines just here, double frames, lots of options just there, including using blacker than black. So lots to play around with just there. We've even got resolution just here where you can change things to super higher. We've got overscan modes, which you can play around with. But the one I want to talk about is actually listed under filter. So from here, under filter settings, if we just drop down where it says null, we can actually use different scalars just here for games to make games look better, or to make games look even more retro than what they are. So for example, if I use 2x SAL, and I can actually boost this up to 4 times. If you're going to do this, just make sure your computer supports it, otherwise it might lag a little bit. And with this now applied, let's actually go back to load up an Amiga 500 game. So simply go back to configurations, and I'm going to load up my Just Jamie 1983 Amiga 500 configuration by going to... Now this is loaded up, because I made that filter change, I'm going to just go to save. And obviously for Amiga 500, we need to go back to floppy disks, and my games are already inserted because I've loaded that file back. Now I've got my filters applied, so I'm going to just quickly check on scan lines, just to give you an idea of where this is going. And then if I just go in, start up. And as you can hear, I've actually emulated the sound of the floppy disk drive mechanism. And as for the game itself, we've got scan lines now. Now, in order for you to emulate the sound of the floppy disk drive, if we just go back to WinUAE by pressing F12, under sound, right near the bottom, floppy drive sound emulation, just make sure A500 WinUAE built-in is selected. Don't check no sound, otherwise you won't get the sound of the floppy disk drive. And also make sure that DF0 is enabled. That's going to give us the sound of the floppy disk drive in drive DF0. And we also want to make sure that sound emulation enabled is checked for this. And if it's too loud for you, we can of course go back down to floppy drive sound emulation and we can alter the loudness of how this sounds. And that's it for today's WinUAE setup guide for the latest release of Amiga WinUAE. So if you like today's video, hit notifications and subscribe so you don't miss upcoming retro emulation content. You'll get little notifications appear every time I release a new setup guide like this one today. Join me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and TikTok. And also to remind you, I have got a merch shop open now. And from time to time, I also ask for little donations. It just helps my channel expand and I can move on to bigger and better things. So anyways, thanks for watching and stay retro.